Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill Sunday night. Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes. They land one of my favorites of the 2026 cycle. Four-star edge rusher Ashari Charles from Venice, Florida, committing to Miami. Now, the Miami Hurricane fans who've been rocking with the boys for a while know my love for this kid. Really was one of my favorite targets for Miami in the 2026 cycle. Dill, this kid's a freaking hammer. You're just not going to find many edge rushers in the 2026 cycle that have more horsepower than Ashari Charles. Really unique body type, right? 6'2", 230, but he's got 34-inch arms. He's got 10.5-inch hands. He's a guy that, because he's a little bit shorter, has the ability to play with really good leverage, but he can also get his hands on you because he's longer than most of the tackles that he's going to be going up against. That's a unique combination, Dill. It's what I mean. Aaron Donald was special for a lot of reasons other than just being long and short, but that was one of the things that made Aaron Donald special. I look at Ashari Charles and say it's not a surprise that he just physically imposes his will on opposing tackles at the high school ranks because he's a little bit shorter. So he's just like getting underneath these tackles. But with that length, I mean, his speed to power is some next level stuff. And Dill, the motor runs hot. This kid plays the game the right way. Really excited to get into this one. Kind of excited to talk about where Miami is going in the 2026 cycle. Before we get into it, as always, to the Miami fans, appreciate you guys. If y'all are taking some time out of your Sunday night to listen to the boys, it means the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, kind of what we're hearing here is I think there's going to be some more coming over the next couple of days. So buckle in. I'm going to give you the T-box here. Ashari Charles coming to Miami. How are we feeling about it?
You said it. If you just gave me those measurables and before I turn on the tape, like almost the way he plays is exactly what you kind of just
Makes
described.
sense.
Because you look at the way he wins, it's pretty consistently with that speed to power bull rush. That is his bread and butter. That's his go-to. And I do think he's got enough burst in like
Yes.
flexibility on the
Yes.
edge to at least challenge tackles. Like, again, I don't know that that's where he's going to win at.
Yep. But
His
I think he does. I'm happy you pointed that out because it's not something he uses a ton, but then you turn on the film and say, hey, that's a solid first step. I think this kid has some juice off the line of scrimmage just because he's so good physically imposing his will. That's what he leans on at the high school ranks. But I do think he has the access to get there as he gets to Miami over the next couple of years.
And he chains his rushes well together too. So like that bull rush that he puts on guys obviously is what he goes to. But when he gets tackles kind of moving backwards and on skates, he does do a good job of like ripping through and again using
Yes.
that ability to set his rushes up and chain them together pretty quickly. Like, yeah, I think he's a very polished pass rusher. That to me is what stood out. Like he wasn't just totally relying on his physical attributes because maybe he doesn't have those, like some of those top end edge rushers have, but a really, really polished pass rusher coming out of high school.
Very, very good feel for getting after the quarterback. Dill, the other two things I have of note, we mentioned the motor. Like this is a guy that plays really hard. I think he's a really good athlete moving along the lines of scrimmage. Like if you're trying to run on his outside shoulder, I think he has that athleticism to make sure he's keeping his outside shoulder clean and being a force in the run game, of which he's very good at. Dill, that this kid takes on blocks at another level. Very, very violent when it comes to supporting the run. Then the production. And Dill, this is something that I love and I feel like I don't get enough at the high school ranks. These kids that have elite traits, and it just never seems to manifest itself on the football field. I think a really good example of this was, Hakeem Williams coming out to Florida State a couple of years ago. Maybe even a guy like Calvin Russell in the 2026 class where you look at, all right, this is a really good football player with a lot of traits, but the production never follows. For Ashari Charles, it does. Still, at 107 tackles as a defensive lineman in the 2024 season, 13 and a half sacks. They are playing some hammers at the high school ranks as well. That schedule that Venice, Florida plays, it ain't easy. You're going up against IMG. You're going up against Tampa Bay Tech, and he's consistently producing and dominating in football games, it makes you feel so good that this kid, the floor is high. Like this kid ain't gonna not work out at Miami, at least in my opinion. Too powerful, too good against the run, too much juice in the pass rush.
And that's the thing. Like Ruben Bain is kind of a similar case. I feel like where you look like again, he was so dominant in high school. Maybe wasn't a top 10 overall recruit because again, maybe he doesn't have the measurables that the NFL is totally looking for. But
Yeah,
again, when you dominate the way they dominate, especially when you're playing good football, it's
yep,
definitely harder to like if you're playing in Western New York football up where we're from, like yeah, you probably need to have the athletic traits to have it because
yeah,
you don't
sure.
totally trust the production. Like, if I'm trying to block you and you're beating me up, fine. Like, whatever. That doesn't mean that much. When you're playing good, dominant high school football in a state like Florida, Georgia, Texas, those states, if you really can dominate and be productive, I think that should matter probably more than some of these services think it does.
I think I agree with that. And Dill, you mentioned Ruben Bain, and I was kind of scared to say it, so I didn't. But I'll come out and say it now. Like that's kind of who he reminds me of a little bit. Now he's not as thick, although he's got a thick, developed lower half. But Ruben Bain was a freaking tank coming out of high school. This dude was a very thick individual. Ashari Charles, not as much, but I feel like the devastating power that Ruben Bain played with because he was a little bit of a shorter, stouter guy, it kind of does remind you of the skill set that Ashari Charles has. And Dill, line of scrimmage, baby. That is look, have I been critical of Mario Cristobal at times during his tenure at Miami? Yeah, absolutely have. What he does recruiting the line of scrimmage, I think, is awesome at the high school ranks. This is a dominant ass-kicking offensive line class. I'm a really big fan of Tyson Bacon. I'm a really big fan of Ashari Charles and Dill. This defensive line class, too, has the ability to be very, very good if they can close on some of these guys. I mean, Lamar Brown, I will continue to believe that Mario Cristobal and Miami are in that one. Do I think they're the leader? No, probably not, but I think they're in it. James Johnson, you're probably leading for. I think he got very good chance at both Anthony Jones or Bryce Perry right. Miami's in it for some elite dudes up front, and I'm very interested to see how good this defensive line class can be. Why is it so important? There's this misconception around Miami that they're like this, we want to throw the football all around the yard and be speed in space. That is not how Mario Cristobal wants to do it. It might have been last year because they had a guy like Cam Ward. They want to dominate the line of scrimmage, and they recruit the bodies necessary to be able to do that at the collegiate ranks. Now, let's talk about Justin Edwards real quick. Uh, you get the opportunity to figure out what kind of linebacker Corey Heatherman wants, right? This is the first linebacker that Corey Heatherman handpicked to join Miami. He flips from Rutgers to Miami. They're a little bit smaller, but some big time juice in terms of the speed. His athleticism and speed at the second level is something I felt like Miami missed at times in 2024, and they've been very intentional in terms of, hey, if you're going to come play linebacker for Miami, you got to be able to run, chase, and tackle, and that's what Justin Edwards can do.
Yeah, and that is a trait that I'm kind of curious to see where Corey Heatherman starts going because I'm not sure we've seen him at like a premier stop, if you will, long enough to know what he wants. So you look at his Minnesota linebackers, they were kind of on the bigger, stockier side, maybe not the premier athlete. But you look at the amount of zone coverage that he wants to play. I mean, you need your linebackers to be able to cover more ground.
And dude, here's the thing with Justin Edwards: he plays man covers too. You turn on the high school stuff, and it's like he can be sticky in man covers too. He's a linebacker that allows you to do a lot of different things, and I have so much respect for Greg Schiano and how he evaluates at the high school ranks. Anytime you flip a football player from Rutgers, chances are you get a pretty damn good player. Dill, I want to get your take on one more thing. That's the Calvin Russell take. Now, I've talked about it, but I haven't talked with you about it. Miami wants him, right? Obviously. The athletic profile is really good. There are some other players on the board that, to me, I think I value a little bit more. And I think the conversation is this. I'm going to put my general manager hat on and say, you could go invest a lot of resources in a guy like Calvin Russell, who I think has massive upside, but probably is going to take a little bit longer. If it were up to you, it's Calvin Russell or another guy on this board and you are Mario Cristobal and you're trying to figure that out, who are you going after? Who's that last guy you
Honestly,
want to see?
I'd be really comfortable with Calvin Russell, mainly because you look
Ooh.
at where Miami's at with their wideout room. Like, guys coming in this class are going to have a bit of time to develop because, again, like they're very young, and those young guys are going to play. And assuming they do play well, I kind of like where this room's at in terms of like giving the 2026 class a little bit of time where they don't need to step on and be immediate factors, because that is a position that, again, young but pretty talented, and there's like a fair amount of those guys. So
So
I don't that doesn't need to necessarily play super early.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. And again, what I always hammer home when I'm talking this is like, look, if Calvin Russell comes to Miami, I'll be fired up. I look at the defensive line, especially with how thin the 2026 cycle is, and say, I'd rather be, James Johnson, Lamar Brown. Like that. That's where, because I think there's such a big drop off from some of these top guys in the middle of that defensive line to the rest. And I love some of the other wide receivers on the board, Jason Lopez, Tyron Evans. We'll see how it plays out. You're looking at a top 10, maybe top 5 class for Miami in the 2025 cycle and or 2026 cycle with what they do in the transfer portal. If you consistently recruit top 10, use the transfer portal as effectively as Mario Cristobal does, you're going to have very talented roster.
But you are right. This probably needs to be 2 to 3 deep in the defensive tackle room, and probably 2 to 3 deep in the edge room as well. Like, you look, I think that's a good point. They got to close it out where they are pretty deep through those two positions, because that's another position that I feel like at times, even this year, Miami probably is more needy in that position than you probably want to be.
Here's the best example. Miami needed wide receivers and interior defensive linemen in the portal in the spring. I know the wide receiver market was not as robust as we thought it was going to be, but you still were able to do what you needed to do, bringing in guys like Marion, bringing in guys like, no, I'm forgetting the kid from Cincinnati, Tyler Johnson. I want to say, but though you might have to fact check me. You can't find those type of guys on the defensive line. It's just nobody was available. So I always look at and say, when it's between an elite line of scrimmage player and a pass catcher, give me the line of scrimmage player at the high school ranks. All right, we'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys. Massive, massive fan of Ashari Charles. And we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.